Okay, welcome to Own It Day 8. And we're kind of going to close the chapter on identity, at least for today. We're going to continue. Obviously, this is a challenge that is about ourselves and something we're struggling with. So we're never going to get fully away from it. Um, but the heart of the matter and what we've been building up to with all of these concepts with identity is our relationship to ourselves. And the feeling and the question that I'm going to pose today is, am I enough? And Brene Brown is our host and theme for the day. There is nobody that I can think of that is more like this is her mission on the planet that she is fulfilling to show us what self love looks like, what vulnerability, what living authentically looks like, and lives it out every day and shows us by example. And this is one of her quotes here. Here's what is truly at the heart of wholeheartedness: worthy now, not if, not when. We're worthy of love and belonging now, right this minute, as is. All right, well, let's get started. Okay, we're going to tackle the heart of the matter and our question of our worthiness and am I enough? So I've got a few definitions to get us rolling here and get us all on the same page. Um, Self-awareness, and that's sort of what we've been working on all week as we explore the different components of identity and some of the questions around that. As we inquire within, conscious knowledge of one's own character, feelings, motives, and desires. So, hopefully, after spending a few days on note taking and questions and pondering some answers, you're starting to get a better picture of yourself. Self acceptance, the act or state of understanding and recognizing one's own abilities and limitations. And there's a quote here from Linda Arnold: in each moment, you're either practicing self acceptance or you're judging yourself. We're going to talk more about that. Self love, regard for one's own well being and happiness. Vulnerability, uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. Authentic, real or genuine. Living authentically implies both being true to our own evaluation of that constitutes a meaningful existence and accepting responsibility for the fact that we create our lives by the choices we make. This, goes back to our overall theme of owning it. And we can own the position that we're in now with our relationship with some disciplines in our lives, like over drinking and maybe overdoing some other things, but we're going to focus on the over drinking during this section of time. But we're responsible for that, and we are responsible for undoing it. And that's what we're going to learn about here today, and why connection to ourselves and all of these concepts of identity and also self-awareness, self-acceptance, self-love, vulnerability, and authenticity are absolutely critical. And again, Brene Brown has a great quote here: until we can receive with an open heart, we're never really giving with an open heart. When we attach judgment to receiving help, we knowingly or unknowingly attach judgment to giving help. So that is a big disconnect there. And I think one of us, and I know for me personally, this has been a huge shift that is making a difference for me personally in my long-term sobriety. Because this shifts it from a willpower perspective to a real deeper, wholehearted understanding. Um, and for me, I have a quote here from the Bible in Mark chapter 12, verse 31, when Jesus is giving, he's simplifying the commands and how to love God and demonstrate that. And the second greatest command, so he's got, first one is to love God with your whole heart, your whole mind. So that, concept of wholeheartedness, loving God. But then second is to love your neighbor as yourself. Well, I'm sure a lot of us, even if you're not of the Christian faith or persuasion, um, you the Bible has a lot of authority and value in our society overall, and that we've probably all heard this verse before. But how many times had I skipped over that second part, as yourself? Duh. Like that's where I was getting, like it just kind of clicked for me recently. I had totally missed that part. And that's where I was not having success and why I kept stumbling in figuring some of these habits out that were causing self harm. I didn't love myself. I thought I was doing a very good job of loving my neighbor. I was checking all the boxes of volunteering and going to church and doing all of the things that quote unquote good girls need to do. But it's hard to give what you don't have. So I'm just going to read the paragraphs that I have here, and you can also read along with me. And so I'm not going to try to get too wordy here. As we work through the concept of identity, the heart of the matter is our relationship to ourselves. The components of identity that we've explored are our commitments, sense of belonging, our unique design, and our values. Hopefully, as you've navigated these topics, you have reconnected with your authentic self or the potential of what that authentic self can look like. Hopefully, you've also developed appreciation and gratitude for her as well, and how amazing and how special she is and you are. No one else can fulfill the purpose you are here on earth for. And we also cannot truly connect and give value to others if we are not connected with ourselves and value ourselves first. We cannot give to others what we do not have. There are studies and research that indicate that the opposite of addiction is connection. These ideas are probably best known and best portrayed by Canadian psychologist Bruce Alexander and his famous rat park experiment, and also a highly regarded TED Talk of British journalist Johann Hari titled Everything You Think You Know About Addiction is Wrong. The basic premise and conclusion is that we as humans have a fundamental need to have trust and attachment with other humans in relationships. It's very hard to connect in meaningful and healthy ways. That word healthy is key, from a place of disconnection and even mistrust for ourselves or being inauthentic. This is why we have spent so much time exploring all the components of identity and trying to identify some misalignments within ourselves that may be blocking healthy connection and appreciation for ourselves and therefore also with others. And there's probably some things from childhood that you have explored, and maybe some instances where maybe you started to mistrust other people in your lives. And this concept of trust is huge, huge. And if you began to mistrust others and put up walls in your relationships, that probably ended up getting turned inwardly as well as a mistrust for yourself. And this can happen very slowly and subconsciously over time. And if we have developed some disciplines in our lives of overdoing some things that have resulted in some health self harm, then we even subconsciously realize that we can't even trust ourselves. That's a lot to unpack and really consider. Um, and this happens in the background without any of us even really realizing it. That's why it is really critical to, and now that you have these tools and these questions and these concepts of identity, this is something that you can take forward. This is not a one and done exploration of self. This is an ongoing, maybe once you get through this process and you feel like you're developing some awareness and how to look at self awareness, you should probably do this quarterly, semi-annually, annually as you move forward through your life, because life changes. We go through seasons. We've learned even with our relationship with alcohol, you get used to your new normal and then you think you've got it figured out. But we know that's not true. We can very easily get complacent and lose focus and fall right back into the same habits and traps and not having good relationships with ourselves and then therefore with others. So I would challenge you to maybe set some time apart, ongoing for the rest of your life to check in with yourself and get to make sure you're staying in a good relationship with yourself. So I'm going to end with a definition from Brené Brown on the concept of wholehearted living and what that looks like. Wholehearted living is about engaging in our lives from a place of worthiness. It means cultivating the courage, compassion, and connection to wake up in the morning and think, no matter what gets done and how much is left undone, I am enough. It's going to bed at night thinking, yes, I am imperfect and vulnerable and sometimes afraid, but that doesn't change the truth that I am worthy of love and belonging. And this quote can be found on page 10 of one of her books, Daring Greatly. And if you haven't read Brené Brown yet or heard her, you just have to type in her name and you will find oodles of uh, talks and interviews. She's written several amazing books, and she also has a new podcast now called Unlocking Us, where this is her whole mission on planet Earth, is to teach us what vulnerability on living authentically and wholehearted looks like. So to round this out, I would really encourage you, of course, to appreciate yourself, reconnect with your amazing self. And let me just say, you are amazing because you're here. I mean, do you know how huge this is to take a deep dive and not stay on the surface and thinking that the problem of drinking is only about drinking? It's about so much more. It's a symptom of a much deeper problem, and that is our disconnection from ourselves. And I just applaud you so much for having the courage to just even be on this journey. You're amazing. Okay, I have several questions here, and please don't feel like you've got to answer all of them or any of them, really. They're really just here as ways to get you thinking critically about what we've been building up to and what we're learning about ourselves. And then some real concrete things that we can then take an inventory of and begin to work on as we move forward. I have another great quote here from Brene Brown: "To see and be seen, that is the truest nature of love." And I think as we're learning that the problem of over drinking or overdoing anything in our lives is that disconnection and not seeing ourselves as being enough and worthy. And, you know, we have just gotten off track, but that's okay. We're getting back on track. And problems that show up in our lives are an invitation to something so much bigger and so much greater. So in some ways, I know I am very grateful for this journey and for this struggle. And I hope that you are too. And do not, try not to come at yourself with too much negativity over something lacking within you. You are merely being human, what we all humans do. And even as young children, the coping mechanisms that we developed are actually quite brilliant. I think along the way, in general, and maybe we should be learning this in schools, we forget, we just don't know to look inward and evaluate ourselves. So much of our learning, in at least in this Western society, is focused outwardly, in learning from, consuming information, when sometimes, and we can just get so disconnected from ourselves. I'm going to start off, before I read through the questions here, I'm just going to be completely vulnerable and transparent here, with a few of my own recent personal insights and examples. As I was going through some of my interests and how I was designed, first I'm going to start off with going back to the personality. And if you have never taken a personality test, that might be something to sort of put on your little list of action items to do. Depending on what test you take, it might take a few minutes, but there are some quick tests out there, but they can be really insightful. And I think for the Myers-Briggs, I am an INFP, which is pretty rare. And so I'm very internal. I am feeling, I'm perceptive. What is the N? So that has helped me reconnect with myself, just knowing some of these things and seeing, like, as I look through my life and how different reactions I've had to things, it's like, oh, that makes perfect sense that I would have reacted that way. The other thing that I have is that I am what they call an empath. So I am, these are people, and again, not a real common personality type, but those of us that are empathic are very in tune with people's literal energy fields. And that might sound woo-woo to some, but it's a real thing. And if we can have words that are sent through the air and cell phones and electricity, believe me, it is possible for people to have energy that is felt by other people. So some of us are very highly sensitive to people's energy. Some are as sensitive to animals' energy out in nature. There's different, I guess, even within the structure of being an empath, what your sensitivities are. Mine, if somebody walks in a room, I can feel that energy. And then when I learned this about myself, it was like light bulb. It made so much sense. And also, if this is resonating with you, I can give you some book recommendations. But a high percentage of empaths do turn to substances because it's hard to absorb other people's energy and feelings, and we want to escape that. We have a hard enough time with our own, much less we literally can take on all of that within our own bodies and minds, and we just need to turn it off. And if you don't know this about yourself and all of a sudden you are overwhelmed with all these feelings, and alcohol is part of your world, and that certainly can quiet that. And so that's been a real self awareness and appreciation now for myself. Like, now I know how critical self-care is. And when I feel that energy, there are things I can do now to take care of myself in those situations. And sometimes it may be walking out of the room. Like, I don't have to stay there. But anyway, I'm not going to go too much more about that. Another thing that I did as some coping mechanisms that I realized was having me very disconnected with myself was a habit of being very judgmental and defensive. And this was feedback that I heard from a few people close to me over the years, but I wasn't really hearing it because I didn't understand where it was coming from and why I was doing it and really how I was doing it, because again, I was so disconnected from myself and where that would have come from. I thought, well, of course we're people, we're judgmental. Like, we don't, like, you're judging me by saying that about me. Like, that was my sort of thought process and argument. Like, so what? Like, we all are. This is nothing special about me. But I moved around a lot as a child and was always the new kid and always felt like the outsider. And, that whole sense of belonging was very off for me. And as my immature child brain discovered, if I could judge you and be defensive, then I didn't have to get close to you. So this was a very clever self-protection mechanism that my internal self developed, again, and I was so disconnected, I did not even know. So this is what some of the process of looking at these things can uncover. So now that I'm learning to be vulnerable and people like me anyway, even when I think they like me a whole lot more now, I can let go of some of these unhealthy, personality traits, whatever you want to call them, characteristics that I have developed and habits as I learn that I am awesome and people do want to be close to me. It was me that was preventing that. And then even on the front of interests and personality traits and how I was designed, I wanted to be an archaeologist when I was little, and I loved art and drawing, and I was fairly good at portraits. And as I look at my talents and skills now as an adult, and how much I love even this world of self-development and learning about my brain and how different and unique I am and all these other wonderful people are, and how we all are just amazing and wonderful. I'm learning that a lot of the skills and interests that apply to archaeology, I'm calling myself now a self-archaeologist. I love that excavation and uncovering and the digging and what it reveals, and and even from a portrait standpoint, the uniqueness of the human face from without, and the layers and the uniqueness of the human mind and personality within. So there's just a few practical examples of me personally being vulnerable and some of the recent insights that I've had about some positive things about me and also some of the negative. Like, we've got to own it all and here. So if there are some common things and feedback that you've gotten from loved ones or friends over the years, go back and revisit those and try to uncover what those might really be about. And I would imagine there's a disconnect from yourself and that you develop those subconsciously as a way to protect yourselves. So anyway, I'm going to read real quickly here because I know you're listening and maybe not looking at the slides, but Some questions you can ask yourself here about identity are, what are the top 3 insights from the lessons on identity in your relationship to yourself? Why? What are the top 3 things you can take action on immediately? How, what, why, when, who? Those are, we talked about a lot of different things the past 4 to 5 days. What are 5 things that you're most grateful to yourself for, and why? What is the most amazing thing about you? And you can write like 20 things here if you want. You've got a lot of amazing things about you. I know you do. What do you need to forgive yourself for? What do you need to let go of? What are you holding on to that may no longer be serving you? What fulfills you? What do I need to be more at peace with myself about? What do I value about myself? What are some things you would do if fear did not exist? That's a big one. Fear and love are 2 main motivators and base emotions for humans, and they're polar opposites. So that's another concept to go inward about. Like, what are you afraid of? Afraid of in yourself, afraid of to let others see. And if you, again, I encourage you, I'm going to link something from Brene Brown here to do some further listening to after this, if you want to go there. Again, that's extra listening. And also a link to the TED Talk if you want to explore that, about the opposite of addiction is connection. Because I'm telling you right now, for 90% of us, and I'm making that number up. I don't know if they've actually done studies on us, but I would venture to say that for 90% of us, drinking is just a symptom. It's not the real problem. I mean, it has become a real problem and we need to deal with it, but it's about so much more, about so much more. And you're amazing and you deserve to be happy, and those that love you deserve you to be happy, because you're going to be able to now authentically love them, because you're going to start off from a healthy place of loving yourself, because you're amazing. You deserve that.